Hi, this is Dr. Stephanie Wautier, and I'm the host of Conversations with a Chiropractor. This is not a health how-to, but rather a conversation with some amazing people I've had the pleasure of being with on my journey of life. Think of it more like Tuesdays with Maury, a fireside chat, or chicken soup for the soul. Grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and enjoy this conversation with a chiropractor. Dan, thank you so much for being on this podcast.
I was a little nervous about it, but I'm okay with it.
Well, I said to someone who was recording, the microphone being in between us can sometimes seem like an obstacle, but you and I have had conversations in this exact room every time you come in, which has been for years we've known each other. So we're friends, and this is just two friends having a conversation.
And that's okay. It's really good.
So you currently live in Ishpeming, Michigan, but where were you born?
I was born in Escanaba. Were you?
I was born in Escanaba.
Were you born at St. Francis Hospital?
The original one on 16th Street.
Me too, but I don't think you're old enough for that, are you?
I am old enough. So you were born in Escanaba.
My twin was born about 13 minutes before me. Her name is Jeannie.
How was that, having a twin growing up?
That's the only thing I know besides having an older sister and an older brother. But my twin, for example, when we were about 2 or 3 years old, my mother gave us some scissors to cut paper. My twin cut my bangs right down to my forehead. I didn't know at that time that was a bad day.
And it was a very bad hair day. I wonder if we polled people, how many would have had either someone else or they themselves cut their bangs short.
These were really bad. I didn't have much hair to begin with, so I looked pretty pathetic. She had the curly hair.
So do you feel like there was a little bit of jealousy or competition?
Oh, yeah. We're just two different people. We are not identical at all.
Mm-hmm.
She has a different way of thinking, and I have the other way of thinking most of the time. I was more creative, more willing to step out and do something different. She moved to New Jersey after she got married, and I lived in Ishpeming for like 50-some years, but I traveled a lot throughout my life. We moved a lot.
Was your husband in the service? Is that why you moved a lot?
No, he was in the service for 4 years. He was in the IBM, and he had to have some kind of clearance for what he did. But when he got out of the service, I got out of the convent.
Now, this is something that we have to delve into. How did you get into the convent?
At the time that I wanted to go in, we lived in Foster City. We moved around a lot. I lived in Rock and Perkins and Foster City and St. Nicholas, because my dad and my mother were farmers, and they milked cows, and my dad was a cheesemaker, so he had to go where he'd make cheese. In the summertime, when I went to Longfellow School in Foster City, the nuns from Racine, Wisconsin, they were Dominican sisters, they would come and teach us for 3 weeks about the Lord and our religion. And I got to like them, and I started thinking, well, maybe I should go to a convent. So after 8th grade, I went to St. Catherine's in Racine, Wisconsin. I did my high school years there, 11, 12. Then I became a postulant and took my first year of college. The next year, I was a novice for a year, which studied a lot about theology and the Lord, and it was considered the cloister. So we did a lot of talking. So it was a lot of thinking and praying. The next year, I was a sophomore at Dominican College in Racine, and I was a novice then. And that year, I was to be accepted into the Racine Dominicans. I decided, at that time I was 21, and I thought, you know what, I want a family. So I did pick my name. My sister name would have been Sister Mary Kristen of Christ the King. But I told the Mother Superior that this was not for me,
Mm-hmm.
and that I really wanted to be married and have children. Of course, she cried.
Mhm.
That was in spring when I
Wow.
left the convent. And so that would have been in March, April, May, somewhere in there. I went to Northern Michigan University in a government-sponsored course, an IBM course. That's where I met Jim, my husband. We each had relationships going on. I started that in September, October. And then in March of the next year, which was in 67, on St. Patty's Day, I asked him if he wanted to take me out. So we went and had a green beer, and then we went to the movies.
That's a fun first date.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to come back to Jim, but I want to rewind a little bit. So here you are, a freshman in high school, 15 years old, 4 to 5 hours away from home. I mean, that
took
must
a train
have,
to get to her scene.
alone, that must have been really scary.
I might have been scared at times, but I didn't really think of it as scary.
Did you, like, that must be part of your adventurous spirit or your, like,
Well, we moved so much. Every few years we'd move here, move there, wherever there was work to be done. And so if it wasn't on the Verbriki farm, it was on the Rock Creamery where my dad made cheese. I went to school in Rock and Perkins.
which
and
are
so
really
we moved
small
around.
towns. People who
You
don't know,
gotta
like
look twice.
a blinking yellow light. So you became very adaptable. Like
guess
here you are the youngest. What was your family life like? Would you say that your mom and dad were loving? Was it like Little House on the Prairie where you were having meals together?
No, I don't think so. It was okay. I felt, we were poor and it was fine. I never thought myself as being poor. I just was glad that we had a lot of hand-me-downs. I was the smallest and the youngest because my twin was 13 months older than me. My older sister was 2 years older than me, and my brother was 7 years older than me. Of course, he died at an early age. He died at 33. He was married to his high school sweetheart, Levon, and they had 6 children.
Wow.
And his 6th child was named after my husband, Jim. He was only 2 months old when my brother died, but my brother had juvenile diabetes, so he had lots of challenges in his life, too. He used to take me everywhere.
So he, like 7 years older, you were like probably the little sister that
He put me on his motorbike and off we'd go, or I was always holding a wrench for him or something. He was good to me. And even my dad, he would call me Shrimp. I was kind of his favorite. So when everybody would want something, they'd say, "You go ask Dad." Of course, he wouldn't say no.
He wasn't going to say no to Jan.
So, and my mother was, I guess you could call her domineering, but she was kind of the boss and took care of a lot of things. She was a strong woman.
Did your mom work as well?
Oh, yeah. She would be out at 5:30 in the morning milking cows.
So your mom and dad did this together.
Yes.
To sustain you, to keep you fed and clothed and...
Yeah, and we learned how to drive a tractor out in the whole field. And I watched a calf be born, and we could feed the calf when they were born, and that was an experience. People don't get that kind of experience in this day and age. I give that to my grandchildren.
Yeah. I think about this too, like the food that you were eating was so clean and pure.
It was. And we learned to cook as girls. My mother would say, "Well, who's going to cook today? And who's going to do the dishes?" We had to take our turn. Some of the kids nowadays say, "I don't do that."
Or they don't know how. Or they weren't ever shown how.
So going to the convent or leaving home at 15 or 14, it wasn't anything really. It was just another, I don't know if I could call it an adventure, but it was another experience.
Were you sort of pushed to do it? Did you want to do it?
I wanted to.
You wanted to do it.
And I had a good life there.
You did.
Oh, yeah. Good experiences, a good education.
Tell us about what that was like. How many girls were there with you?
In our class through St. Catherine's, between the 9th and 12th grade, there was 315 in our class.
Wow.
And I'm used to being in Foster City with maybe 8 or 10 in your class. Like
wow.
7 So 315 was a lot of people. I do remember that I was 168 when I graduated. I was the 168. So I wasn't the dumbest person. I was average, which is fine.
So you were taught by other nuns. They were your teachers.
Yep.
You lived in like a dormitory style?
Correct. And we even lived in a convent when I was a novice. We lived in dormitories when we were going to high school. And as postulants, we lived in a house. And sometimes there were up to 30 of us in the house. I mean, that was challenging, living with a bunch of women sometimes because I had to learn some self-esteem and to stand up for myself and to realize that not everybody will agree with you.
Not everyone will like you. We're all going to be nuns and we're going to have harmony. And
well, we have a lot of harmony, but we had a lot of other stuff going on. There was one person who was always critical of me, so I had a real hard time with her. I had to grow up in a different way than what I was used to on a farm. It wasn't exactly like running two cowboys with a disagreeable woman.
What a very different life experience.
Oh, yeah. It was. I could tell you lots of stories about my experiences, but we could be here for
Did your folks write letters to you? Did you get to go home and visit them?
We got to go home for Christmas, and we got to go home for the summer. And that's when we would help them on the farm. And that's why I learned to drive tractor and take the old pickup boat and learn to do a stick shift in the mud.
Very self-sufficient.
We learned to do a lot of things. We learned to help out and to do our part.
Yeah. A very, so many people would say that, well, what an amazing experience that you were given. When we talked a little bit before about Wayne Dyer, one of the things that I know he said was that he feels that he was put on this earth to be able to survive and then teach people how to survive,
Well, I guess I've learned to survive because I'm also a cancer survivor.
You are?
Well, if you want to talk about surviving, when I was 46, I had a mammogram and found out that I had cancer. I can remember, we have two sons, Jim and I can remember when I came home and told him that I had cancer, my oldest son started crying. And I said, you can stop your crying now because I'm not going to die. And now it's 30-some years later.
Wow.
And I'm still here. So I must have a purpose, and I think I do.
Yeah. And how cool for your boys to see how strong their mother was. You didn't take that news as a death sentence. You were like, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
This is another thing that I'm going to get through.
And 30-some years ago, it wasn't as positive as it is now. When they had the first Relay for Life in Marquette, I walked for udders, which I was a cow.
How fun.
It was.
Well, we'll come back to your spunk for Halloween in a moment, but I think that your attitude has always struck me as being so amazing. You're just so positive. You have perseverance. That probably came from your upbringing. Or maybe you were just born with it because, like you said, your twin sister has a different personality and outlook on life.
It doesn't mean she's bad. It's just that she's different.
Exactly.
And we're so different.
So you decide to leave the convent and you go to Northern Michigan University for these IBM classes.
That's when we learned to do keep munching back then, when they have these big cobalt machines.
What a different time.
That was different.
And then your first date with Jim is on St. Patty's Day.
Yeah, he befriended me a lot in class. And of course, the guys in class said, Jim, maybe you should go with her. But I didn't know that till later. But we just kind of hit it off. And I was going to marry a tall, dark, and handsome guy. Jim was not tall, dark, and handsome. He's not bad looking, but, it wasn't the image that you are when you're 21.
That's the funny thing, right, about what our dreams and expectations are versus what is reality. You got along and you fell in love.
It was not sparkles and music or anything like that. It was downright practical because I realized there was something about Jim that was loving and caring. He's a very responsible guy. I came up with different words than tall, dark, and handsome.
Yeah, right. We'll definitely come back to your courtship.
I remember all this.
You wanted a tall, dark, and handsome gentleman, and you got this wonderful man who you've been married to now for 57 years.
Yes.
Even though I've said to you in the past, like, oh, this must be stressful. You said just now that you wouldn't change it.
Yeah.
That you don't feel like things were stressful.
You can say that and you can realize it, but I don't think of things as stressful. It's something you have to face and make the best of it. I always ask the Lord to come with me for the day. Maybe that helps. And I think I've always done that. Not more so now than when I was younger. But
because we talked about facing mortality.
yeah, as you get older and as things change, and with my husband facing some sickness this year, I never thought of him as looking old, but when he's sleeping in his chair, I look at him and think, oh, Grandpa.
How old is Jim?
Jim just turned 82.
For the very first time in your whole existence and marriage at 82, he just now looks like a grandpa.
Well, he looks like his dad, which could be a great grandpa. But yeah, it's more intense than what I faced before. I always saw him differently. When you're going through some challenges, sometimes you lose a little bit of that spark. You got to realize that everything isn't, because Jim's a very strong person.
Yeah.
And with this sickness, I've had to do a lot more things. It's still okay because I'm always grateful that I can do them. It's hard to watch him go through. And now that he's getting a little more spark back, I can even argue with him a little bit.
Then you know he's healthy, right? If he's got enough spunk to start an argument or be sassy to you.
When we first went out, we went to a movie, The Godfather.
Oh.
And that movie was Somewhere My Love. And that was one of our favorite songs. It still is one of our favorites. Another favorite that we really like is Could I Have This Dance for the Rest of My Life with Anne Marie. And that's kind of sustained us through certain things. We find things that we look back on that make us happy. So that helps.
Yeah. To sort of have that memory or that remembrance of, this is us together and this is why we fell in love or how we fell in love.
When we were going through it, we didn't realize how it was going to affect our lives.
Would you say that Jim is a romantic person?
Quietly romantic. He's not real showy, but I know some people are very emotional and show, Jim will show it, but he'll show it gently and quietly. And I just have to know that.
Exactly. I love that book, The 5 Love Languages.
Okay.
Do you know about that? For some people, they might receive love in gift giving or they might give love in gift giving. But regardless of if you both have read the book, you know each other so well after 57 years that you are content and happy with how he's showing love.
Yeah. And he was never a gift giver. Let's see. We got married in July. And in November, I was pregnant because I was thrown up. Doctor. Well, when I had our first son, he bought a dozen yellow roses. I gave him a yellow rose to carry for our wedding. And I carry daisies. But anyway, he bought these dozen yellow roses. And the lady in the room with me was allergic to roses.
You had a roommate?
Yes. Her name was Elizabeth. The roses had to sit out in the hallway. So I would have never expected him to buy roses for me. So 5 years later, when we had our second son, I said, don't buy me roses. Don't buy me flowers. I think he bought me an orange dress. But orange just reminds me of a pumpkin. I wore it, but I would tease him once in a while. But he's not a real gift giver. He gives in other ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we can go there or not, but on my dad's deathbed.
Yes.
So did I ever tell you that?
No.
What happened on my dad's deathbed?
No.
Well, on a Friday, we went to see him because he was in the hospital and they were suctioning him out and he was having a hard time breathing. We visited as much as we could and then we left. The following Tuesday, my mother called and said that Dad died. And I said, was he trying to gasp for air when he died? And she said, no, he was very peaceful. But he said, tell Janice that I'm sorry for giving her a licking with that leather belt when she was dying.
Oh,
and I'm going, oh my God. I mean, how much more can you feel love?
yes.
And I said to my mother, I said, well, I remember that day I was being a snot.
Wow. And he carried that all those years, that remorse, that regret.
I didn't.
I love to hear that. Like that. I mean, yeah, you're right. Like, how loved were you? Like, he on his deathbed. And how old were you when he passed?
27.
27. So I won't do the math.
40 some years.
Yeah.
It was, back in 74.
Wow.
April, I think. My brother had just died in January of that year.
Oh, how hard for your whole family.
I had a hard time. I didn't realize that I had to say goodbye to my brother, and I could tell him that. It took 14 years for somebody to say, you could talk to your brother, You do this through your life, and you
learn.
Are we on?
Yeah, we're recording.
Well, I thought we weren't, and I just bring that up because
I think it's good to talk about these natural and normal things. Yeah.
And what I found out from my experience with my father saying that is I see God in a different way. I don't see him as a punisher or anything. I see him, I think we can relate to our father and have some relational thing with God. If you did have a good experience with your father, then there's a different way of getting to the loving God because you don't have that experience of father.
You had a beautiful, loving relationship with your dad.
Yeah.
So
it was different than most kids have. He didn't spoil me, but if I wanted cashews, when he'd stop and have a beer in a bar, would you like some cashews? He'd bring me a bag of cashews. He didn't, I wouldn't say he spoiled me. He just showed.
He gave you a treat. He showed you his love in that way.
Yeah. And my mother did it in different ways. Some people don't agree with me, and it's fine, but I think God is mother too. That's my experience, not everybody's.
I think it's hard for people to wrap their head around, and you didn't stay a Catholic.
No, I didn't. Because in 1998, I had a friend who goes to Trinity Lutheran Church in Ishpring. Her name is Mary, and she encouraged us to come to her church. My church, I had an experience that was very hurtful, and I had to live through it. It was Lent that year, and I was hurt by what they did to me. Just because they didn't agree with me, they got rid of me. I can remember going to the bottom of the cross that year and saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I kind of related with that. Where were we going with this?
A friend of yours invited you
to Trinity Lutheran Church, and we've been there ever since. And I found out that it doesn't matter what church you're in, there's always going to be some kind of stuff going on that isn't so sweet.
I think it was Gandhi who said, I love your Jesus, but I don't like your Christians, or something like that.
Yeah.
We are all human and sometimes a bad representation of who God is.
Yeah.
And,
but
none of us
every church has it. I don't care what church you go to.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. Although I found out in my life, I don't even know if I want to share this, but when you don't like something in somebody that really bugs you, you can relate it to filing your nails, and you might be a little bit like that yourself. So the file will take that little sharp edge off if you can recognize that, oh yeah, she has something I don't like, and you know what? Maybe I'm that way too.
I have heard that there could be a character trait that really annoys you in someone, but it's because it's so closely to what you are or what you do. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's humility and growth, right?
As it was a different realization than what I thought.
You told me once that you went to these classes. Was it at Northern? At some point in your life, you took these classes to be a better person or something. What am I thinking about?
A lot of my classes seem to make me a better person, whether I want to be or not. Maybe I was referring to taking those Enneagram tests and the Myers-Briggs.
Yes.
Boy, you can learn a lot.
Absolutely.
I found out that I have a gift of hospitality that I didn't realize. I knew I was that way, but I accepted it. So that was from Myers-Briggs, I believe. It's something about feeling, sensing.
Well, yes, like EFPJ or,
I can't remember. I think I was FN something J.
Are you an extrovert or an introvert?
I'm on the borderline. I'm more introverted. When I found that out, I thought, introvert? But see, I've learned to do some skills that would help me because people don't see me as an introvert.
No, people would say you're very outgoing and
I'm not. I love introverted stuff.
you get rejuvenated by just having that alone
Fresh.
time.
Quiet music. When I went to that fashion show last night, I had a ball. He made it in the suites. They sure offered enough things, and it was right in front of us on the table. And I'm thinking, I came here with the idea that I was maybe going to have one thing. Oh, I must have had 4.
Well, that's very unusual for you.
Yes.
Yeah. You're a diabetic.
I am.
And you take really good care of yourself.
I try to, yes.
You exercise, you stretch, you're very active outside in your yard. What would you say to someone who is having trouble doing something to take care of themselves, or maybe somebody doesn't have your positive attitude? What would you say to them as an encouragement?
I could say it to my son, Dan. He's also diabetic. When I became diabetic, I had polymyalgia. And I was on prednisone for like 3 years. Polymyalgia often comes or happens in women who are Norwegian ancestry or Finnish or one of those. I couldn't move. I didn't know what was happening to me. So for 3 years, I took prednisone and my sugar started climbing. My numbers were like, for diabetic numbers, like your glucose was over 8, which is, I was dizzy a lot and I didn't feel good. And so I took some classes offered by the Memorial Hospital. I think her last name was Carlson. She showed us the pyramid and I kind of followed that and I lost 40 pounds. That kind of helped too because I was 180 pounds and I'm only 5'5" at the time. And so I thought, I want to feel better, even though this prednisone wasn't making me feel better. I tend to be a bit of a perfectionist. I like to follow rules and I like to disagree also. I just thought I want to be better. So it took me a few years. You don't magically get better overnight from stuff like that. Then curves came into tow and I became the weight manager person. I taught weight management and I told the girls we're always stars. I said, you go out on your porch, stretch your arms out and say, I'm a star. I said, no matter what anybody thinks. And I can remember telling them that what you buy, you eat. So if you buy a big bag of chips, you're going to eat it because they're really good. But if you buy the smaller bags, you only have to deal with 15 grams of carbs, which you can have for a snack. So I learned and taught what I learned. And I became close to the women that I taught and shared stuff with. That helped me too.
Like being a mentor.
Yeah.
And that probably solidifies your own health decisions, right? Because if you're telling someone to do it, then you have that authenticity that you're going to be doing it yourself.
And I do. That's how I learned
And
to tell
you
them
do.
because I said, I know it works for me. Your numbers aren't always great, but they're better because you're trying. And then, of course, we had a curves book that suggested diets and stuff. And you don't really call yourself saying you're on a diet. You're saying you're making good choices. You can change that too. So it doesn't feel so restrictive. And you can have anything. You just can't have a lot of it.
Those are all really great things to think about because so many people are like either on a diet or off a diet. They don't think of the choices that they make. You thought of your weight loss as just a way to make your body feel better and be healthier. Where so many people maybe are caught up in the physical look, right? Like I want to get into this size jean or I want to look like this or
That's not a reality either because no matter how bad you think you want to be in a 10 or an 8, it's not going to happen all the time.
It can't happen all the time.
It comes partly from your heredity too, what you do with your body. Now that I'm getting older, I have this nice little bulge right in my body that I think, do I accept that or do I try and do these things that make me feel uncomfortable for stretching and stuff? So I think, well, I'll just do the best I can.
Absolutely.
You wear a bigger top.
You always look good. Tell me how sometimes on Halloween you come dressed as a bee or as Dorothy. Where did your fun for costuming come in?
I love not really scaring people, but I think that might be there in my blood. But I love just being silly because you could be somebody that you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done a number of costumes throughout my life. I started with a cow costume, walking for others. Then I did a bee costume that is something with Relay for Life for cancer. And I don't know, I see things like maybe in a Vinnie's or Goodwill or something. I say, oh, that would make a cute sweater to wear, and then make a daisy flower to go wear around your face. Because my daughter-in-law borrowed my bee costume, so I went and visited her at her work at Valenti, the County Medical Care Facility. And I was a daisy. I was a flower. Mm. When I was working for the 3 churches, I was their secretary. I had a friend that was coordinator for the younger kids, like kindergarten, first grade. Her name is Annie. One year, we decided to go to Westwood and visit the board. We knocked on the door. She was a hunter. And she put like whiskers all over her face, and she had an old man's half of a mask on, and she was dressed like a hunter. And I had made myself a deer costume. So she knocks on the door to the superintendent and says, "Would you like to go hunting with me and my deer?" They chased us out of there real quick. They
didn't appreciate it?
I guess not, but we had fun. Mm-hmm. And I love to be a witch. I've done a number of witch costumes. And when my granddaughter, Harley, was 13, she was on a basketball team. I also at the time did red hats. And so I decorated my garage with the help of my grandson, Tyler, in black tablecloths. So it looked like a cave. That was quite the job. But he stapled all these black tablecloths throughout the whole thing. So it was like a big black cave. And then I made a photo booth so people could take their photos. We could do some pumpkin cuttings. Instead of using scissors, we ripped a pumpkin out and had a pumpkin contest. I made different food like mud pudding in a little pumpkin thing. I had the red hats come over, and we had witches' balls. They were all witches. So I have an album of those pictures.
Oh my God.
And that same year, Hardy was 13, we had a party for the girls. But that's... I think they had a ball. If they didn't, I did. So I was a different witch then. I still have witch costumes. My mother says you should not have a witch in the house. I couldn't really buy that. I said, Mom, witches are fun. They're bad for you or something. I said, I think they're cute. I don't care if they're ugly or not, because I like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah,
I think that's when I decided to be Dorothy.
You were adorable, Dorothy.
I still have that costume, and once in a while I reincarnate that costume, but this year I'm going to be somebody different.
Oh, I can't wait to see. We'll have to make sure that we get you scheduled on October 31st. I think this is so cool that you have such a zest for life and such gumption. I didn't know this until a while ago, but you actually had a job at a radio station too.
I always wanted to work with men, because I did so many things with women. I wanted to work with men. They were all gifts to me because they respected me. Sometimes I was their mother. But George was quite special. He's away from here now. His daughter still lives in Ishpeming. It was quite the experience. My husband has had the cable job since 1964. I mean, that's a lot of years.
Yes.
And that's fine for him because that's what he likes. But I'm grateful for all the experiences I've had because I've had so many different jobs. I stayed home with my boys for the first 15 years. I was a transplant. I didn't know anybody in Ishpeming. That was really hard because it was hard to get to know people. But throughout the years, I've gotten to know them. My first job was at Mather Nursing Center as a certified nursing assistant, which was a good thing. I thought I wanted to be a nurse. And I found out, well, maybe not. I mean, I could be a good nurse, but I didn't want to be a nurse. I went to Northern to do office services. I did some temping at Northern after that. I took that test that you have to take, and I did some of that temping. That was interesting, but it was hard on my body.
Yeah.
Sitting,
typing
and learning. And I was in the conference department with Judy Place. She was good to me, but it was hard work. I did some temping for Manpower. After that, I worked at the CCD Center for 7 years as secretary for the 3 parishes. And from there, I think I went to Jubilee Foods, or did I go to McDonald's? Everybody should work at McDonald's for at least 6 months because it would change your attitude. And everybody should check out groceries for people. At that time, I had a lot of migraines because I had those flashing lights. So it was hard for me I'd had to deal with having flashing lights and check groceries out. After that, I was accepted for KROCK radio, and the main office was in Iron Mountain. David Lee was the manager of that, and he accepted me to be the office manager for Marquette. It was our satellite office. So that's where we had salespeople come in. It was a really different experience. When they wanted me to sell after about 6 or 7 years, I said, no, I don't really make a salesperson. I resigned, and I went and did Meals on Wheels. 7 seems to stick out because it seems like every year that I worked, it was almost 7 years for a number of things. So I did Meals on Wheels for quite some time. And I used to wear my Halloween costume because they love it. I was Goldilocks in this, and I took my 3 bears in a basket with me, giving the meals out to people. That was fun too. So, and then after that, Meals on Wheels, I was getting towards the end of not wanting to work.
Yeah. A lot of years of work.
Well, my point is, it's good to have the same job for so many years, but you don't meet the people that I've met. Now that I'm retired, I don't meet as many people either, but there's a lot of memories, so it's okay.
I think that you must have some sort of very unique and brilliant personality to be so malleable. Even if we go back to you moving around when you grew up and then going to the convent didn't seem like such a big deal to you, but I bet it would to Jim, who needs the same. Yeah. And you are a creative and adventurer. I would almost say that you're fearless because...
Well,
truly.
This was not fearless to do this, but it was okay.
But really, you're diagnosed with breast cancer. You've got 2 young boys and you're like, don't cry. I'm not going to die. There's something within you that is so,
I think it's gift.
It is.
It isn't something that I gave myself. It's something that I was given. And partly was my willingness to learn and to change. And if we're not going to change, it's always going to be the same. And I tell people, if you're always doing what you've always done, you always get what you've always gotten. People do the same thing no matter what.
Right. And they're not learning. And I think that you've always been a learner of life and an observer.
And now I used to do big bulletin boards when I was in the convent. I'm talking this big wall. I'm not talking a little 3x5 corkboard. Well, I know at Trinity Church in the last few years, nobody was doing anything and somebody started it, but then left it go. And I called them up and I said, I don't want to step on toes, but would you like me to take over the boards? I don't know where that came from, but it was something I did for the last few years. I changed bulletin boards for seasons and times. Right now I have a bulletin board with a big daisy I made from my costume. And it's got a bumblebee by it. And it says, be still, know that I'm God. That one always struck me. So that's a big bulletin board. But that should tell people, give them a gift of, we're so busy in our lives that maybe it's not a bad idea to be still.
Absolutely.
Then we have another bulletin board, and that's for all the news items. Because I told them, don't put any news item on my bulletin board. And then we have the entrance one too, that when we come in the church, right now I say all are welcome. That's been gift to me too, because I like doing that. I trim the tables. I figure my house, I like to make it look good. And so this is God's house. And now the people appreciate that I have a nice fall thing on the table, each table.
Absolutely.
So I've been doing that for years. And so I don't have a job, but I have a job.
You do. You're using your gift of hospitality.
Yes, Dan.
Jan, we've been talking for 45 minutes already, which is wonderful. And we didn't know exactly what we would talk about. But I could probably take 5 phrases that you would tell people, be still and know that I am God. What would you say in closing? Or are there other things that you want to share about your life, your experiences, or any advice that you'd give us, listeners?
I've learned that advice is not so good to give sometimes, because people don't think like you do. And you can share your experiences, but when you say this or you should do that, I learned that's shitting on people. So to give anybody advice, I would only share what I've learned. Maybe there's one thing that strikes me right now. When my father-in-law died, which would be Jim's father, he was a wonderful man. He was a hardworking man. He was a big crab sometime. I mean, you didn't know who you were going to get when you went over there. When he was laying in the funeral home, he was going to be cremated. They lay him out on a plywood board and they put just a white cloth over, and you can go visit him, his family. It was just family there. That was an experience. Nobody else was available to take him home from the cremation, and I had to carry my father-in-law home and bring him to home.
In the vessel.
In this little plastic thing that's about this big. The thought struck me, in death, there is no sin. I've almost got a tear in my eye. That was another gift. So it's not really advice, but realize that no matter what people are like, in death, there is no sin.
Love that. And
I don't know why I thought of that, but also,
I think it is a beautiful thing to close with. I think that your life is an inspiration, and I so have enjoyed you being a guest on this podcast, Jan.
I think you should tell us your life someday.
Someday.
You know what? I want everybody to know how wonderful Stephanie is. She thinks everybody else is wonderful, but she forgets how wonderful she is. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Jan. I didn't pay her to say that. Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, like, or subscribe? You can find me on social media at wautierwellness.com, Dr. Stephanie Wautier on Instagram, or Wautier Wellness Chiropractic and Massage on Facebook. I'm so curious where your next conversation will take you.